All right,
Everybody jealous.
I think we're ready to begin. And the nice thing about the second group is we have a little bit of airflow, where the one before we didn't. So I'm gonna go ahead and kick off if I may. My name is Amy Capolanti-Wolf. I'm your senior judge today. I'm really pleased to be here. My background is I've worked largely in human resources as Chief Human Resources Officer of large enterprise technology companies and software companies. So I've been at Pepsi, Disney, Cisco, cybersecurity company called Symantec, and now I'm at a company called Dayforce, which is human capital management platform to do talent acquisition, payroll compliance, et cetera. And I'll sit on a couple of public boards as well. So I'm thrilled to be here and can't wait to hear about your presentation and what you're going to share with us. And I'll have my fellow judges introduce themselves.
Okay, Kevin Mark Lodi, I'm a management consultant. I've worked in a number of fields. I mostly focus on growth strategies, so helping organizations at times of startup or expansion or reinvention. Worked in a number of industries. I'm also a consultant, a senior executive advisor with a company called Cognotech that specializes in artificial intelligence. So this was a particular interest to me. Looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, hi, I'm Wally Turner, and what I bring to the table is I'm 91 and I was in the computer business for 45 years. So the combination of that gives me a little bit of experience, okay? And I'm looking forward to seeing how you're going to solve that problem that you have, okay?
Wonderful. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves.
My name is Ella Call. I'm Kamya Ramakrishnan.
Perfect. Okay, we have the next 20 to 25 minutes for your presentation. I'll be your timekeeper. I'm not going to tell you where we're at unless we get very close to the end and you're not quite through your presentation, give you a little nudge. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and put my time clock on so I'm authentic to what we're trying to do here. And from there, please begin and let us know what our roles are and what your role is, and we can go from there.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Today we are excited to present the new propylene glycol implementation program at Microsoft. As we continue to prioritize sustainability with innovation, this program is a key part of our strategy to reduce AI's environmental impact.
Imagine a typical pool that you may have in your backyard. This standard 16 by 32 foot pool holds approximately 15,319 gallons of water. On average, an AI data center typically uses around 1.7 billion gallons of water per year. So this is equivalent to about 110,973.3 of these pools. Keep in mind during this presentation that every time you hit enter on any ChatGPT resource, you're using a severe amount of fresh water. Fresh water is a limited and precious resource on our planet. Access to safe drinking water is a fundamental human right. Without these essential aspects, maintaining stability and good health becomes nearly impossible. Water is the lifeblood of agriculture, and it sustains the livelihoods of billions and drives socioeconomic development. When water is scarce, polluted, or inaccessible, livelihoods are threatened, food security is threatened, and the risk of conflict increases. Why should a computer receive more water than people?
We are NextGen Tech Solutions, and we will be presenting to you the Board of Directors at Microsoft. Today we'll be discussing the opportunity for Microsoft to implement a closed-loop system that involves propylene glycol into future data centers as a way to further align with their sustainability goals. First off, allow us to introduce ourselves. My name is Ella Call, and I'm the Chief Legal Officer here at NextGen Tech Solutions.
My name is Patrick Phelan, and I'm our Chief Financial Officer.
And I'm Kamya Ramakrishnan, and I'm the Chief Ethics Officer.
Now that we've introduced ourselves, let me take you guys through our today's agenda. So we're going to first start off with discussing Microsoft's current position and the problems you face right now with AI water consumption. Then we're going to dive a little deeper into the ethical, financial, and legal aspects of the problem to understand its broader impact. Then we're going to implement our solution, and we're going to give you our impacts on those same three aspects. After that, we're going to give you just some overall broad benefits of using our approach, and then after that, we're going to wrap everything up with a summary of our key takeaways.
Microsoft was founded 50 years ago with a mission to empower every person and organization on this planet to achieve their very best. However, during their pursuit of this mission, they realized the environmental impact that they had. 4 years ago, Microsoft made a bold move to promise to be carbon negative, water positive, and zero waste by 2030, while also pledging to protect more land than they use. Understanding climate change as a critical threat to the environment, they have made combating it their top priority. We are determined to meet the needs of companies as AI and technology grows and drive meaningful change for a healthier, more sustainable future.
We recognize your company as a global leader in addressing climate change and environmental injustices with a strong commitment to sustainability. Your goals around sustainability are outlined directly on your corporate responsibility and sustainability website. Your sustainability report revealed that as of 2022, your water consumption had increased 34% from the fiscal year prior. We can see from this graph, in addition, from fiscal year 2022 to 2023, your water consumption had increased an astounding 23%. However, looking at a more positive side, since the initiation of your corporate responsibility and sustainability goals, you have replenished more than 61 million gallons of water and protected over 15,000 acres of land. By 2030, as Kamia mentioned, Microsoft aims to replenish more water than they consume across direct operations. While we realize your company has been committed to responsible and sustainable consumption production, we believe that there is still more that can be done. We believe our solution not only aligns with your goals, but will further lead to the achievement of your goals.
As industries grow and new technology is developed, sustainability has become a major focus. Many companies have set ambitious goals, such as investing in carbon reduction and renewable energy. However, there are still many problems that remain. Data centers are using more water and energy than ever before. This poses an important question. Are we really doing everything in our power to ensure a sustainable future? Or are there more effective solutions that need to be put in place to keep up with the growing demands of AI and technology? That being said, let's address some of the other aspects and problems that may arise.
As AI technology and usage advances, there are serious environmental challenges we must address. First, there's the increased carbon footprint. AI data centers require massive amounts of energy to operate, which leads to higher carbon emissions. Additionally, there's a strain on scarce water sources. Current cooling methods rely on severely water-intensive methods, putting pressure on our already limited fresh water supply, especially in regions prone to drought. We also realize that the increased demand for AI means these challenges will only rise. As companies ramp up their AI development, water usage and carbon emissions will rise with it. It is imperative now more than ever that we implement a solution that reduces or completely eliminates water usage. Propylene glycol as a cooling agent is an example to no longer rely 100% on water for cooling, thereby addressing the water scarcity issue. But the issue we feel is most present is the fundamental right to clean water conflicting with the fundamental right to information. Why as a society should we have to sacrifice one for the other? There's no reason why we should do that. And it is critical now that we implement a solution that implements sustainable alternatives. Now let's explore the ethical, financial, and legal implications of these issues.
There are a few ethical issues that are clear. As Ella mentioned before, it is clear that everyone on this planet has a right to fundamental health and sanitation. But the rapid development of AI data centers is conflicting with this. UN Sustainability Goal number 6 ensures the availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Target 6.4 targets the increasing water use efficiency across all sectors and ensuring that freshwater resources are managed sustainably. Additionally, specifically 6.4.1 targets that water use efficiency and calls for reductions in the volume of water used in relation to economic output. UN Sustainability Goal number 12 ensures the sustainable consumption and production patterns, while Target 12.2 aims that by 2030 they will achieve the sustainable management and efficient use of natural resources. This target directly aligns with Microsoft's mission of replenishing more water than they consume by 2030. But the current cooling process that they have is preventing this. AI holds immense potential for addressing key water-related challenges, including optimizing agricultural irrigation, enhancing wastewater treatment, and detecting harmful contaminants in drinking water. As AI continues to evolve, it is essential to establish environmental safeguards while navigating these uncertainties to ensure its responsible development. This responsibility extends beyond tech companies. It is a shared duty of society as a whole, including those who use and rely on technology.
In addition to the environmental and ethical concerns that are present with AI water consumption, there are also serious financial implications that we need to take into account. First of all, water scarcity and pricing are big concerns. As demand for water rises, the costs rise with it, and it makes it difficult for companies like Microsoft to sustain their AI operations. In addition to this, infrastructure costs also take on a big cost as well. Expanding and upgrading AI systems requires serious investments in new technology, and in addition to that, the increased water bills also tack on to the company's operating expenses. These operating expenses with the water bills also become even more expensive in places where water is already scarce.
It is also important to recognize the legal implications of AI's water consumption. First and foremost, governments are constantly implementing regulations and laws created and aimed towards environmental sustainability and protection. Large consumers of water are required to obtain water right permits. For instance, the prior appropriation doctrine and riparian rights doctrine govern water access, while states like California and Florida have specific conservation and reuse policies. It is also important that large consumers of water regulate their water consumption and manage water resources sustainably. This is because they must report water usage and ensure that discharged water meets quality standards. These legal requirements put pressures on Microsoft to manage water resources sustainably. Now that we have introduced our problem, what is our solution? I'm going to hand it over to Patrick to talk about it.
Our solution to this growing concern is to implement a closed-loop propylene glycol system to your data centers. Propylene glycol is a synthetic liquid, also known as PG, that is used in a wide range of industries. It is also commonly found in the food, pharmaceutical, and cosmetic industries, and its versatility makes it a key candidate for our decision to use it in your data centers. The main quality of PG that makes it so desirable for the use in this situation is its hygroscopic nature, which means it retains and absorbs water more effectively than a system would be using without it. It's also non-toxic, biodegradable, and environmentally safe and versatile in many conditions, which makes it a great choice for industrial use.
Where and how are we going to implement this? We propose that this new approach be implemented in a Texas data center that has not been built yet. This data center, named SAT-82, is approximately 250,000 square feet. Construction is set to break ground in 2026. It is easier to implement this solution in a whole new data center rather than pay to adjust existing data centers. A PG-based solution provides many strategic opportunities for Microsoft. First and foremost, this solution will further align you with your sustainability goals and lead you to your mission. Propylene glycol reduces water consumption. It reduces water consumption by 30 to 50% as opposed to traditional methods. In addition, it is the safest alternative than other antifreeze solutions like EG, making it better for our ecosystem. It also will reduce your total energy consumption. Glycol improves heat transfer efficiency, which leads to lower carbon emissions. Finally, this will lower your long-term operational costs. With lower maintenance needs and water and energy usage, your operational costs will now be cut down. At first, you are going to be spending a lot, but your return in the future will be greater, and by 2031, you're breaking even.
This initiative marks a significant milestone in our journey towards sustainability, bringing us closer to achieving your company's mission. By prioritizing eco-friendly practices and long-term impacts, we're meeting our goals and setting a standard for responsible business practices. Together, we're proving that sustainability and success go hand in hand, creating value for both our stakeholders and the planet. Now that we have introduced our solution, let's address some of the ethical, legal, and financial aspects of propylene glycol. Is it just for data centers to be using vast amounts of fresh water when billions of people across the planet don't have access to clean water? The UN recognizes the right to fresh water and sanitation as a fundamental human right. Excessive water consumption by data centers can strain local resources, potentially depriving communities of this essential resource. Propylene glycol-based cooling systems often operate in closed-loop systems, significantly reducing water consumption compared to systems that rely on constant fresh water intake and evaporation. This conservation is crucial in regions facing water scarcity. Additionally, using propylene glycol can mitigate the risk of data centers exacerbating existing environmental inequities. We have a responsibility to future generations to preserve natural resources. Excessive water consumption today can compromise the ability of future generations to meet their needs.
Here we have a graph of the water consumption in relation to the PG implementation for the current solution and our new solution. You can see by 2032, the gap begins to widen between our water consumption versus the current methods. And this is important because as the years go on, the gap only begins to widen. And as AI continues to scale, this gap becomes bigger, and it also just shows that how much of a difference this propylene glycol can make. Here we have a graph showing the break-even cost and how much it would take to implement at first. Although it may seem like a steep investment, the long-term benefits make it well worth it. You can see by about 2031, you will break even with the cost, and after that, you will just be seeing the gains of the operation. So how much will it cost? The cost of this deal can be broken into two components: the actual propylene glycol itself and the installation costs that come with installing it. Based on the data that we've found, this AI system would require about 6.6 million required gallons, and according to prices from Shell and Grainger, a 55-gallon drum of propylene glycol costs about $750, which brings it to about $13.63 per gallon. You also need to take into account the local plumbing and installation costs that would come in with installing the copper pipes needed to use this propylene glycol system. These costs have to come in with local governance and state regulations as see fit. And Microsoft announced an astounding $80 billion investment in AI that they will be using to implement new data centers and to expand their AI and cloud operations around the world. They also said that half of this investment will be used just in the US. Microsoft has seen great revenue over the past 10 quarters, and it only continues to rise. Gross profit per Bloomberg has also been on the rise, showing that Microsoft currently will have great sustainability. It's a very safe investment, and it has boosted investor confidence. This solution and this success shows that this $80 billion investment could very much have propylene glycol implemented into it, making it a very realistic situation. Another important thing to look at is where Microsoft plans to finance this investment from. Looking at your debt to equity ratio, we can see that most of your financing comes from equity as opposed to debt. This shows a lot more stability and will result in also boosted investor confidence. Also, looking at your earnings per share, you have been performing very well, and that number only seems to continue to rise. While researching how we'll source this propylene glycol, we had to take into account the recent news that's come in the last month. The US has recently announced new tariffs on many of the key exporters of propylene glycol. For example, Germany and China, as per the latest data on Statista, were the largest two exporters of propylene glycol, now face tariffs of 20% and 34% respectively. All countries in the EU, like Germany, face that same 20% tariff, and other countries like the UK face a new baseline tariff of 10%. After our deal is accepted, we will explore fully into the situations and logistical financing opportunities that may come with this, and we will see whether to absorb costs, pass it on, or change our location to different exporters with more favorable trade laws.
It is also, if Microsoft implements this propylene glycol solution, it is important to look at the legal regulations that you must follow. First off, you must follow Section 316B of the Clean Water Act, which regulates how water is withdrawn and discharged from data centers. This ensures that operations do not harm local ecosystems. In addition, the Environmental Protection Agency and Subpart G of the Clean Water Act regulates the disposal of toxic wastes such as propylene glycol. Although propylene glycol is not toxic in moderate quantities, if large quantities are disposed of or spilled, it could be toxic based on the contamination level. In terms of our Texas facility, there are many Texas-specific laws you must follow. You must comply with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality's regulations. specifically Chapter 330, which deals with waste management. If propylene glycol must be discarded or replaced, you must follow the waste management regulations. In addition, you must regulate how PG will be disposed. As I mentioned before, it is not toxic in moderate quantities, but if large amounts are spilled, it could be toxic. In terms of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the last regulation you must comply with is the Air Quality Standards Act. While propylene glycol itself would not directly vent any emissions into the atmosphere, cooling systems and other related equipment would need to be monitored to ensure that vapors or aerosols are not being put into the environment. You must also comply with Chapter 11 of the Texas Water Code, as I mentioned the prior appropriation doctrine before. This establishes a first-in-time, first-in-rate system. Large water users are required to obtain water permits because they take water from surfaces such as lakes and reservoirs. The last thing you must keep in mind is you must report your water usage to the Texas Water Development Board. The Texas Water Development Board tracks water usage across the state and integrates it into their state water plan. Most importantly, these regulations remind Microsoft that it must balance innovation with sustainability.
As we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, AI data centers use approximately 1.7 billion gallons of water per day. Throughout our 4-person team, we inputted about 10 prompts into Copilot each day, which averaged about 40 prompts per day this semester. So this is equivalent to about 57,600 ounces of water, which equals 3,600 water bottles. How much water have you wasted? Today we addressed a critical issue regarding the future of Microsoft's operation, the misuse and overuse of fresh water. As AI workloads continue to grow, the environmental impact of this water becomes increasingly unsustainable. Our resolution is clear. Ethically, something else must be done. After thorough research, we believe a viable solution to this issue we face is to implement a propylene glycol or PG-based cooling system. PG offers a more sufficient and sustainable way to manage AI cooling operations, which significantly reduces consumption while still maintaining optimal efficiency. Our mission is to make Microsoft a leader in sustainability, and by 2030, we aim to not only reduce the water consumption, but to replenish more water than we use.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. We hope our proposal demonstrates the value and potential of our solution and leads to a successful partnership. We would now like to open the floor for questions.
Thank you. That was terrific. So just as a reminder, we're going to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes asking questions. We'll remain in our characters of being the board of Microsoft and you all. And then the idea is we'll also give feedback after we're complete. So I'll kick off with the first question. So when I think about the sustainability efforts you've laid out for us, is from an ethical perspective, is it not just the data center we're trying to also ensure is not using too much water consumption, but the use of using AI at all as part of identifying the consumption of water? Because you're using AI as a data center, right? To help you're trying to take the data centers and make certain you're not using too much water consumption for AI usage. However, how do you think about AI as a way by which to detect how much water you're using?
Can you repeat the last part of that question?
She wants to know if you should take into account just using AI less. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I'm saying like how's AI playing a part in measuring and managing and governing this? Is that even in part of this, or is it just more about the consumption of water in using AI from a data center perspective?
So this was just more a part of the consumption of water from the data center perspective because AI is growing and you can't control how much people use it. We see that it's growing, especially with students, like they're using it more than ever. So we were just trying to solve the solution of that problem is going to be there no matter what. Like people are going to continuously use AI, but we feel that we could help and make it more sustainable by focusing on how much less water to use rather than trying to use AI less because we personally don't feel that.
You can't govern AI.
Yeah, you can't govern the usage, but you can change how you cool the specific data centers which relate to AI.
Just to kind of add on to what Ella was saying. She's saying because AI is so new and we don't really know the full scale of it, and especially because it's very dependent on how many people are using it per day. That's why we chose to focus more on the centers because it can give us more of a fixed kind of
You
scale.
can measure it. Right. Thank you. Questions from the judges?
Yeah, I have similar question on that is how does AI contribute to your solution? And number two, you haven't separated the cost of AI if it has any costs. Okay, it just seems to be a mystic use of it, and yet it's probably the core of your solution is that the control of AI and the use of water, and on top of that, you've got the growth rate after so many years. Now, is that due to the implementation of the use of your formulas, et cetera, through AI? Is that in incorporating the other centers that have the water usage for Microsoft?
I can take that.
Is that where you get your growth?
So to answer your first part, the AI itself, the price of it, actually the AI itself has no cost. The cost is to actually maintain the AI and use the data centers, which is where the water comes in, because you need the water to cool all that electricity or the place would just catch on fire. And then for the growth, that was more to show because how AI is scaled in usage of the past couple of years, and we know that it's only going to continue to grow as the whole world continues to just buy into it, because it is the future of technology in the world. We wanted to show how the water usage without the propylene glycol will just keep getting higher and higher. But as the usage of the AI goes up, our propylene glycol system will help maintain those costs at a more consistent rate, which shows that gap getting bigger and bigger.
And to also answer your question, like, we can't really control the amount of people that use AI because really anyone with access to technology uses it. Like, every time you enter anything into Google, the AI comes up first.
It's like an automatic thing.
Yeah, whether you want it or not. So it's not really that, but we think that implementing this solution is definitely a better use of, the AI's
Yeah,
better
what-
use of our resources.
Whether you use AI for one center, okay, whatever we call that center, okay, whether you use it for one or we use it for 1,000, it's the same cost. You
Well,
don't increase your
It would
cost.
more depend on the size of the center, because obviously in different parts of the world you might have a bigger or smaller center just based on the amount of traffic that's kind of going through that region. But in terms of the amount of cost per, like, the size of it, yes, it would be consistent with that, but it would just more depend on how big of the center we're doing. And like Ella said in the presentation, we wanted to start with the one in Texas because they haven't even broke ground on that one yet. So we think it would be a lot easier to just implement this from a fresh start as opposed to kind of scrapping a center that's already in use and taking it out of commission to build it. So we think that is the reason we started with just one, is just to kind of test it out and see. But we are confident that after we use it on this first situation, we'll just continue to one by one, every new center that's being built, we'll start to use it. And then once we have enough to where we can start to go back and take one out and kind of renovate them and implement our solution, we're going to do that.
Okay, so as the Microsoft board, and we have you guys consulting with us, and you're sharing this particular solution that you've identified that you're really championing, right, which is to use PG. What are some of the other, so I have kind of a barrage of questions. One, I'm curious, what are some of the other solutions that you explored, and what are sort of their impacts? I could be more specific about that. Second, I'm curious about PG in particular in terms of, in recognizing we're Microsoft and we've made an enormous investment in AI, and you pointed out that it's not just us. There are a number of us titans along with Google, possibly Meta, who are all using AI, who are all rather, because of our investment and looking toward AI as a future growth area, that we're all going to be the big, we're all going to be having these data centers that are consuming a lot of its energy. Ideally, we would find ways to reduce the amount of energy that's expended. That's our real thing. So I'm curious as to what our use, as well as that of Google and Meta, how that will drive up the production of PG. So I'm curious about what are the impacts of PG production. Where is it produced? What are the needs of producing that? Because we're going to be responsible for driving, for maybe doubling or tripling the amount of PG that is produced in order to integrate this as a solution. And then the third thing has to do with, just to confirm, you're proposing San Antonio. So on the one hand, it's the fact that this is a new build, so we can build it in, all right?
Yeah.
Did you look at all, so sort of yes or no question, did you look at all at the costs of us having to retrofit existing data centers in order to accommodate using PG in our systems, the plumbing and other things you mentioned that are part of it?
Yeah, so for that question, that last part of the question, I can take that one. So we didn't find exact, like, there's no numbers exactly on how you would need to retrofit a current existing data center, but the propylene glycol pipes cannot touch with other pipes because they are antifreeze, they cool, they can't touch with the other pipes. So just talking to like engineers that actually work at Microsoft, it is really expensive to like change data centers. They are doing it now. They are like, even if it's moving a pipe 6 feet to better fit like with their regulations, they are doing it. But we just
And Ella, is there a risk with those pipes getting too close to each other? Is there danger if those are you may not know, but is there a risk with that? That because I would think that would that presents another sort of liability area. Well, also just, yeah, of course, safety, worker safety, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I don't know what the exact law is for Texas, but I know that in New York, they have to be at least, I think, 6 inches from each other for domestic water piping.
Okay.
Antifreeze is more of a kind of niche solution, but I have worked with plumbing and I know that like when it comes to hot and cold domestic water, there need to be a certain amount.
Okay, so it's possible in the retrofit situation, we as Microsoft might face some problems with leakage or maybe large scale release of PG. We don't, and that despite being biodegradable or non-toxic, we don't really yet know what the long-term impact of that sort of problem would be. Is that right?
yes.
Okay, so as San Antonio, then this idea of building in from scratch allows you to address these sorts of things, take those precautions. But is it also, are you also proposing San Antonio as an opportunity for proof of concept?
Yes.
Okay,
So, and then also I wanted to hit on that first part of the question.
Yeah.
Talking about some of the alternatives.
right.
So we believe that antifreeze is the way to go, but another big antifreeze type that we found was ethylene glycol, and it's very similar to propylene glycol, but it's a little bit more efficient, but it's a lot more toxic for the environment, and it really degrades the ecosystems that these pipes are kind of implemented in. So we think that the the reduction in efficiency is very much worth the increase in safety and sustainability. And we think that at Microsoft, you guys would see that as well.
Yeah, because
And
that
you
is your mission statement, is to be sustainable by 2030.
Right, one of our concerns is that, let's say we make this, so your financial projections were over what, was it through 2038? 2038?
Yes.
So 12 years or 12 to 13 years, okay. So what if we came up with a way to dramatically reduce our water use through improved computing power one way or another, and we've made this big investment, and in 5 years we find we kind of don't really need this as a solution? Is there do you have any shorter term projections or what it might be if we end up sort of scrapping the use of this or needing this as a solution?
Yes. So that kind of has two parts to the answer. So in terms of the long-term projections and you saying that we might have better computers that might require less energy, I think still having this system in place, because all that's doing is just making you even more water positive.
Yeah, you're
Because
reducing your
you're
carbon
still-
emissions, but your water usage is still staying constant, so.
Yes. And then also, can you repeat that second part of your question again? The shorter projections?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was very interested on the 2030 to 2032 range, which is about 5 years, 7 years in the future. And we think that after the implementation in the data center in Texas, in about 2030, 2031, you will break even. And that actually works perfectly, because that's when you said you actually wanted to become water positive as well. So we think it's almost perfect timing that you would begin to break even there, and then after that, you would really start to see the benefits as opposed to what you're working with right now.
And what do you think the increase in demand for PG would be? Seeing as there are these other industry, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, food, et cetera, that use it.
So I think that just because of how massive the tech industry is, I think that it wouldn't even compare to something like the food industry in terms of the amount of water, especially
Meaning we
water
would use
needed
much
to
more.
cool. We would be using much more. And that would come into place with kind of what I was talking about with the tariffs and importing and exporting. We would need to kind of adapt to all this new news that's came in the last couple weeks with President Trump and all these new tariffs. So that's something that we would be working to research in, but everything is so new that there's not really even any data out there that would kind of allow us to come up with a strategy just yet.
So that would really
be kind of-
incentivize us to implement this in places where those tariffs wouldn't be borne, right? So in other words, in other markets, maybe,
Yes.
okay.
We would try to find countries that still export a good amount of PG but have a lot more favorable tariffs. Like maybe switching from a company like China or a country like China with that 34% tariff, you find one that's actually not even in the EU and it has that baseline tariff of 10%, but is still able to kind of fit your exporting needs or at least a portion of them because it's just saving you some money with those tariffs.
But we're talking about using it maybe at a data center that's not in the US, right? As
Yeah.
well.
Yes, there are significant data centers that aren't in the US, but the majority of data centers are in the US. And it's harder to place data centers in other parts of the world just because a lot of the other parts of the world, which I think we take it for granted of in the US, is that they don't have access to fresh water. There's just not enough water there to cool the data centers. So I think that's why they tried to do it here. We have a surplus of water and
Yes, a different line of questioning, but similar. So you think about business sustainability, and your first thing was to stop gap by using this chemical that will help, reduce water usage. Did you think from another business sustainability perspective of fixing the root cause of just the need to heat these data centers? Because what you have now is potentially a temporary solution if you think of all the capital you have to put forward in terms of new facilities, retrofitting them, purchasing this chemical. Did you think as another alternative might be, hey, Microsoft, let's figure out more progressive ways to use less energy and therefore less water?
That's what we're talking about, the fact that we're looking to innovate on ways that expand. So it's not that we're heating the facilities as much as that the computing process, the data processing emits.
Yeah, but I didn't see that as one of your I guess my question is, the solution you came up with is let's go after with this chemical and retrofitting or new builds. Another path we're discussing could have been, hey, that's a stopgap for now, but something that may be more sustainably and more ethical would be just reducing, to your point, the consumption of these data centers in terms of the water that's required to heat or to cool them. Was that another alternative you considered, or was it just mostly down the path of what you just described?
well, I mean, reducing the consumption would go hand in hand with you would just need to use AI less. Like it would go in terms of people use AI and then
I'm not asking that question. It's not, I wanna use as much AI as I wanna use. I want Microsoft to find better ways to ensure the consumption of data centers is less. So it's not just abating it by giving it this chemical to reduce the water consumption. Is there just a different way to use the computing power so you don't use as much energy?
Yeah, she's talking about a systemic solution
Yeah,
rather than
yeah.
something that's
Yeah.
treating the symptom.
I think
I-
she's talking about existing software that already exists. And that's wonderware, okay?
Well, no, I think what she's talking about is that so what this does is this addresses the use of PG, treats the symptom
Right.
or treats the problem of this incredible energy usage and the demand for cooling. Is there something, as our consulting firm, is there a more systemic solution that you had to propose that would address the problem itself, which is the incredible power that's needed? I mean, that's more our expertise probably than theirs, but
Yeah, well, I understand your question, but the issue is AI is so new that there was no really data on how to reduce the consumption while still being able to produce efficient like answers in the production. So if you accept our proposal, we can definitely research with other engineers that could definitely figure that out. But propylene glycol is our expertise.
I just add on to kind of what I was saying, piggyback on that. What she's saying with how it's so new, also in addition to that, just the data on kind of the increase or decrease in what the energy consumption is per year, it's not really going down at a good enough rate for that to really even be considered as something. So even though you think that this PG and going the way of not as much doing less energy but better water cooling, it might be a short-term solution, but it actually would be a long-term solution. And kind of like what I said before, even if you are decreasing the energy use as well, by still having this system in place combined with the decreased energy, it only is better for your sustainability goals because you're just increasing your ratio of water consumed to replenished.
What are the consequences of PG production? And we're going to drastically be, if we have this demand, have you looked into what the effects of PG production are? Its output into the environment, its use of energy.
Yes, so that's
It's used a lot already in like air conditioning, HVAC systems, car cooling systems. So it's a very like well-known like chemical basically. So there really aren't like that many like harmful side effects of using it because we probably come into contact with it every day, maybe right now through the HVAC system going on. Yeah. So
yeah, I also want to add. So that also comes into why we chose PG over an alternative like ethylene glycol because of how sustainable it is for the environment, because it's biodegradable, because it's non-toxic, and it's very safe. So by ramping up production of it, we actually wouldn't be doing as much harm to the environment as we think.
yeah, there were a lot more harmful environmental aspects we came across when we were researching ethylene glycol as opposed to propylene glycol.
But we would be driving up the costs of it, right? We would either, so
Yes, the demand for it would definitely be going up.
So that would impact what other industries? I mean, air conditioning, okay, but pharmaceuticals, right?
Yeah, cosmetics.
Cosmetic,
Okay.
And that comes into more of the supply chain work with how
automobile.
that's kind of at an uncertain point right now with the tariffs, so we can't really do the projections yet because for all we know, those tariffs can change next month, and that's something that would kind of have to come with sustained research, and that would happen post-proposal.
Yeah, you're controlling PG and the use of it with water, and anything that flows that has to be controlled can be monitored by existing software, so you've got that solved. That will fit within.
Yes.
Yes.
So-
Jeff, did you have a question?
Just a quick question,
Yeah.
because I know your judges want to
Yeah,
give feedback, but moving away from some of the engineering questions and the important kind of ramifications of your suggestion, if you could just quickly walk through the ethics part that you wanted to emphasize. I thought I heard you say that there's an issue of justice in what our current practices are.
Mhm.
And could you just describe, are we being unjust in our practices? How do you see that? How would you discuss that?
So currently there's about
2 billion people.
there's 4.2 billion people in the world who don't have access to clean water, and our population is 8 billion. So that's like more than half of the population. And with data centers using 1.7 billion gallons of water per year, that takes a significant amount of fresh water away from people in places, around the world, fragile regions that don't have access to this clean water.
And why is that unjust?
Because we're using more water to cool a computer down than kids who don't have water in fragile regions that they have to like walk miles just to get clean water and walk back, and by the time it's like
They're struggling to hold the containers. I mean, in addition, every 2 minutes, a child dies from a water sanitation related disease. So while we're talking about it up here, we could be solving the issue. I think it's important to note that 1 million people die a year from water sanitation related diseases, and your water consumption had increased 23%, and it also can increase 34% from the year prior. So I think it is important to realize that a lot of people are suffering. So
Thank you.
Especially
Thank
with
you.
Microsoft's mission of becoming so environmentally conscious, I think it's important to address that issue.
Thank you.
So we're at time in terms of the presentation, and thank you for keeping us on track, because we're all also interested in the technology of how you're describing this, but equally and more importantly is the ethical considerations behind this. Is if you go down one path, there may be consequences as a result of that path, and what does that do to the ethical considerations of others in terms of the right to clean water. So now we're gonna take off our board hats, you're gonna take off your consultant hats, and let's give you a chance, we'll give you a chance for some feedback. I'll start off since I'm talking already. So I thought, first of all, you guys know your topic really, really well, and you picked a very complex topic in the sense of, first of all, Behemoth and Microsoft and how they are looking at their usage of this, and it's how they run their business. So it's something that's like their bread and butter, and while they have expectations for their shareholders around how they're being responsible, they also have a business to run. So I thought you had a good balance between here's how you could do it fiscally responsibly, but also do it in a way where you're gonna be able to get to your goals around water consumption. So I thought you were very good about laying out your business plan. I thought you had very good statistics to kind of back up how you're thinking about, the approach. And so, in general, I thought you had a good grasp of the knowledge. I think you all talked a little fast. So I know it's probably out of nerves and a little bit maybe more volume. Because we want to hear from you. You've got a lot of good things to say. So just remember to breathe. And you may think you're talking slow, but you'll almost have to talk even slower, and it will probably be at the right speed for us to consume it. Just some feedback there.
Me, I guess. Okay, so I'm curious, what were you as you put this together, all right, since you're not competing anymore, all right? What did you feel your presentation was most vulnerable to? What did you think were some of the spots that a person might poke holes in?
I could take that.
Cost.
I think, well, yes, one, the cost but
Yeah.
that also kind of goes to scale with, because it's such a big company like Microsoft and they have so many kind of resources out there that we would need to kind of take into account for. That's why the cost would be so high. But I was more thinking just because of, and also this is also why we kind of chose the topic, just because we were interested in it. This kind of reason for it was just because it's so new, and that there's not a lot of data out there that would be out there for some kind of topic that's been in the world for a very long time. So we had to dig very deep to find a lot of that data, and also our projections, it was a lot harder to make projections just because we don't have as much past data to go off as opposed to a lot of the other topics we could have went for. So I think that was definitely something where it was just coming up with these graphs and projections because we didn't really have much past info.
Yeah, one of the things is you look at your audience and look at old men like myself with hearing aids and everything. You take Saturday Night Live address the problem because they said that they've just instituted a new program whereby they're going to have somebody help the hearing impaired. So they went to the news, and the newsman said, this is the morning or the evening news of the day, etc. And it switched to another screen, and he said, "Hey, that is
So talk louder.
Talk a little bit louder. No, but I think that your question is really good because you're dealing with a very emerging issue. Now, we've known for many years that data centers consume too much water anyway, and then AI also is very loud in terms of noise pollution. So how did you end up picking this topic? Because it's a hairy one, and one that you said there's not a lot of data behind it. I'd just be curious.
Our professor likes to mention all the time how AI data centers are using a lot of water and stuff. So that kind of, we all have her. So that kind of just piqued our interest in it.
Yeah.
So we were like, this is an interesting ethical issue. And we did more research and we were like, this is actually a good topic that we could go with. It's new, it's relatable, everyone uses
Innovative.
AI, and yeah, I think it's unique enough.
I think our professor actually mentioned it on the first day of class, and we all have her in separate classes, but we all came ready and we all suggested the same topic, and so it was pretty easy to pick it because we all It was, yeah.
Actually,
We all
I'm not
got-
the professor.
we all
She's not the professor.
We all got the same,
No.
yeah, it's a
But it
different
always
professor.
frustrates me with my teams because they pick such difficult topics. Like they could make it so much
Sorry.
easier. But I love that about them because
That's
they
how you're
want to
gonna
take
learn.
that challenge on. They're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
picking the
Yeah.
easy win.
Because if it's
They're
easy,
doing
then it's
what's
like
interesting to them.
every group has that
I
topic.
agree. You're gonna learn a lot more.
I'm sure you're not gonna run into another topic like ours.
And as consultants, seeing as you don't represent the PG manufacturers, you're consultants, right? So you should be fairly, say, unbiased, but of course, be advocating something. It would have been interesting, I think, to have put together a matrix that sort of assessed or compared other alternatives that maybe the board has heard about. Did someone bring that up?
No. So when we were doing run-throughs, our other professor we had it in there. We did have other alternatives in our presentation, and they said, "Why are you trying to advocate? Like put in the other alternatives. Just focus on one." So we did have that, but we took it out. But maybe that is something that we should have.
It
We
was
should have
actually
thought
ethically
about.
Well, the board's gonna ask you that question. Having
Yeah.
been sitting on boards of myself, I
Right.
always wanna say, okay, that's one solution. What are other ones you've considered? And you can do the pros and cons and the ROIs and say, we did that, here's the one that we think is best.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think
absolutely.
that was a good thing though, cause we even though we didn't have it on our slot, we still did do the research, so we were
Yeah.
ready to answer those questions about alternatives.
I think there's always a problem with sort of asymmetrical positivity, right? Like this is everything that's great about our solution and not recognizing any of the downsides. And I think a board would want to, one way or another, get at what are the consequences of this going to be though? What don't we know that we're not intending, right? The unintended consequences. So to explore those, I think sometimes it's helpful because again, you're not salespeople. So you have the opportunity to be a bit more transparent. And I think that and frankly, it's very much appreciated, I think, by a board when they think of, say, the PR fallout. So to even understand how it might drive up the cost of PG and if that would then increase the cost of pharmaceuticals. And are we going to get blamed for it? It's the big tech
Which
companies.
goes from an ethical perspective, right,
Exactly,
in terms of,
exactly.
is Microsoft going in and cornering the market on this and
Right.
or others able to
And
have
even
access?
to indicate the idea of if there's some sort of life cycle assessment that could be done or that you would also be advocating we do somehow. In other words, this proof of concept would also involve a study, so it's not just about saying it works, but also looking at how it's impacting things, what its other effects are on a local basis. The fact that that most of the data centers you're saying are the US, I guess one of my questions is, does that mean that it affects not understanding the world of water, but does it affect the US supply of water? Can salt water be used in some way? But at any rate, does it affect the US consumption of that? Because the reality is, unless I think the real problem would be if we, Microsoft, said, actually the way to do this is to put a data center in Kenya where we can use Lake Victoria there, and now we are taking water from a more local ecosystem, and that's problematic. And in some countries, the regulations might be a lot lower. There might be a big incentive by a government to get money from the investment in the data center, and then we're making, so the onus is on us for that. But in terms of your solution, I think that there might be some fair sort of, I don't know, it's tricky if we're your client, but some sort of like cautions in terms of how how other things might be done that would be problematic, that would really start to create a greater problem for us if instead we said, aha, this is the other way that we can do this more in a cheaper way for us, frankly, in a way that saves us money. Just to address the benefits of this in areas where we might anticipate having having data processing centers. But I guess I'm just to say to explore the things that people don't want to ask, the questions that really show where they have the potential to do things that are damaging to humanity and other parts of the world where they're a lot more vulnerable.
Yeah, I think that the AI is the Bitcoin of the computer industry. It's a complete mystery how it's going to work and how it's going to affect you. and it's a weakness of anybody's situation, okay? It also can be its strength, but we don't know yet.
It's just
Too
a,
new
it's a
to-
very high
Tip.
risk, high reward
Yeah,
situation. And I
exactly.
think that's kind of our biggest kind of thing that we can give as a caution that
Because the whole business model of Microsoft is predicated on AI, right? I mean, going
Yes.
forward.
And
And so, you know, it's gonna be.
that's also, it is a strength for them because it's so new, you can also spin that because Microsoft is so innovative, they want to do things that no one's doing, so
Yeah, be
it's
the
also
first
something you
in
can
their,
push in that.
That's right.
industry to try something new. And if it works out, then bragging points, I guess.
And with that, there's ethical considerations, right? You might do damage by trying to be market first, right? So, listen, I know we're winding down on time. I have a couple questions. So, like, what are you guys gonna do when you grow up? What are your passions?
I wanna be a CPA. I wanna like be a forensic CPA and I wanna have my own firm.
Wow, forensic, that's heavy, man. That's great.
That's scary.
Yeah, yeah. And then you do your own thing versus going to like a big firm.
Yeah, where they're working in corporate, yeah, I wanna do my own.
Well, I'm a finance major and international finance really interests me, but I've been working on Bloomberg, so I definitely think I want to explore working at the Fed because that's something that I like working with the terminals and I like economics, so I think that's something that I would want to do and work with, especially development economics is what I like.
Very, very exciting.
I'm very interested in just being from New York and just always being around it. I wanna work with risk management, especially in corporate world. I'd rather, as opposed to CommUse, I'd much rather work for a big Fortune 500 company than do it on my own because I like being a part of a team, and being a part of a big team like that is definitely something that's high on my priority list.
I love the diversity of like each of where you all want to kind of fall in spaces. Is there anything we can answer for you or any feedback for us?
One other thought, I think, again, as consultants, and you're business majors, right? More or less, okay. So think of the value chain, right? In other words, everyone who's a part of this particular solution. Because one thing, so you're thinking of the workers, the business partners, the supply chain, the end user, all of these things, right? Because one thing that is also sort of a cost or something that would be important to factor into the model is any sort of plan for worker safety, that particular dimension of it. How are the people who are implementing the system addressing problems with the system? How are they affected? So I think that supply chain is always a really interesting baseline from which you can assess the ethical implications of a particular solution. Just last thought, so.
Anything you wanna add?
Was it?
Anything you wanna add?
Value chain, I meant to say value chain, not supply chain, sorry.
Well, I'm congratulations, first of all. You did an amazing job. I know this is a lot of work that we don't even see beneath it. And then two, you were so articulate, you knew your stuff. And I'm just really, I don't know if I could have done this at your age. So I'm super impressed with you guys, and keep pushing on this stuff because it's the next gen. We've kind of screwed it up for you in this generation. You guys need to help us fix it. So I really appreciate the thought that you put into this and the work you put into it and the effort. Thank you.
Thank you
much.
for your time.
Thanks.